All right. Good morning, everyone. I will call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for June 20th, 2024. It is 10 o'clock in the morning. And Commissioner Johnston, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, item C is our calendar session. Is there anything to add? All right. Hearing none, we will go on to item D, which is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. And I do want to acknowledge we received one written comment that the commissioners have seen. But if you are in the audience or online and wish to provide public comment, now is the time to do so. And if you're online, please raise your virtual hand. All right. Hearing none, we will move forward. Item E is our department update. We were supposed to be joined by our Fairgrounds Director, Gary Wirtz. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it today, so we are going to postpone that for another meeting. That brings us to our work session. There's nothing today under work session, nothing under consent agenda. And then we get into old business. Does it sound like my microphone is on? Okay,
Yes.
okay. Just sounds quiet. Old business H1 is consideration of approval in the matter of a resolution and board order for Yamhill County Board of Commissioners to concur with the inclusion of a public building project in the Dayton Urban Renewal Plan. This is continued from June 13th of 2024. And commissioners, we had discussed last week some reservations about this particular urban renewal plan. I know we had expressed a desire to see some of the other taxing districts weigh in. We do and did hear from the Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District. They submitted a letter to the mayor of Dayton and the city council. And I think that their concerns echo what some of our concerns were last week. So I really appreciate them weighing in. You know, we just approved 2 smaller budgets in taxing districts that are impacted by a lot of these urban renewal districts. And we're looking at raising rates later on the agenda for other things. Everything sort of works together with these. And so my concerns about it remain. I think urban renewal tax increment financing forces taxing districts to cut basic funding and services over the life of the plan. I've also never seen an actual ROI on a urban renewal district. And the added element of public projects in this particular plan doesn't make sense and is counterintuitive to tax increment financing because public properties, as you know, produce no tax revenue. So there's none now and there won't be any in the future either. So at this point, I personally am not going to sign on to the resolution and board order, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, Chair, I concur with that, and I have expressed in the past when we've had other urban renewal projects up for consideration that I have some concerns. Mine go way back to when urban renewal was used in New York. It was a gentrification tool, and you had historic old Black neighborhoods that were pretty much decimated under the rubric of urban renewal. So I sort of have a bad taste in my mouth for what that's done to to enclaves and neighborhoods where wealth was gradually being built. But in this particular case, what we see and what have come before us, it goes into what is that return on investment. If you look at the concerns we have over fire district financing, and in this particular case, they'd get $1 million, but they'd lose $3 million. I don't see how that pencils out. I'm specifically concerned about fire districts. We know we've got one in the West Valley that is concerned about how they're going to move forward. So anything like this, to me, just what it does is it kicks the can down the road, and ultimately the pain will be there, and we're all facing constricted budgets. So I would not be in agreement with concurring with this resolution.
Commissioner, thoughts?
So being directly involved with the Soil and Water Conservation District, I'm in those meetings every single month, and there are concerns with these, and it's not specific to Dayton. It's just with renewal districts in general, they start stacking up.
Yeah.
The first ones were okay. Everybody's like, yep, great idea. It's kind of that, to me, it's the easier route to go get funding versus putting it out as a bond or a levy. But for Soil and Water, they have legitimate concerns that it's not this one in particular. It's the gross of them all that start stacking up and it becomes issues. So,
Yeah, and I really appreciated their letter. I thought it was very to the point, but it was very positive in suggesting other options for funding.
Right.
Not just no, but we want to work together to be successful, but there's other things that are maybe better. So I thought that was a great letter.
Yep.
And I think on that point, if the board is not going to sign on to the board order and the resolution, then it would be a positive for us to craft a letter similar to Soil and Water, what Soil and Water Conservation District did, so that we're on the record basically mirroring those concerns and encouraging the city to maybe look at different options. I have started a letter. I know we talked about that last week. It's not quite finished. I wanted to sort of gauge where we're at today. So I can, if we approve a letter today, I can circulate that later this afternoon after the board meeting's over, and then we'll see.
Yeah, the 45-day confer and consult period does end tomorrow. So as the folks from Dayton mentioned last week, if the board was interested in providing written input, the deadline would be tomorrow. So yeah, if you wanted to approve in general a letter today, then you could all sign on to it when it's ready.
I'm okay with that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, do we need a formal vote on that or just consensus?
You can. Yeah, I mean, if you want to, you've talked about what the general content of the letter would be, so it probably isn't a bad idea to go ahead and have a vote.
Okay. So considering that we are not signing on to the resolution board order, I would move approval of a letter by the Board of Commissioners to, I guess it's the mayor and city council of Dayton, letting them know that that is our collective decision, but also why, some of the concerns that we've expressed in our public meetings, and also encouraging them to perhaps explore other types of funding that don't have such a significant impact on our taxing districts. That's a very long motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right. Motion passes. I will finish up that letter after the meeting today, and we will get that distributed before the deadline for tomorrow. All right. Item H2 is consideration of approval of a recommendation from Economic Development Competitive Grant Review Committee regarding the Economic Development Competitive Grants Program. And this is also continued from June 13th of 2024. So in the last meeting last week, we had asked for some follow-up information, which Joya, you have provided to the board. That includes who the grant review committee, who sat on the committee and reviewed the applications, and also whether or not these individuals or companies, businesses, nonprofits have received county grant funding before. Correct. Okay. Commissioners, we've all had a chance to review that information. Any thoughts, concerns?
A couple of things. I was speaking to Joya about sort of the past being prologue to these. And in the past, we've had a real struggle with trying to be fair and to try to, we know it's picking winners and losers, but how do we get the word out to people who are not the same people who keep applying over and over? And it's hard to do that. I know the efforts are made and some people just choose not to apply. And maybe it's too rigorous, maybe it's too, daunting and intimidating, but we've always really wanted to see folks get involved, the smaller businesses, the folks that really struggle to keep the lights on. So one of the things that I would recommend at this point, since I do have concerns about the fact that a number of them have received grants in the past, but that was not a criteria, was it?
It was not, and to my knowledge, we've never asked that question in the past. And I'll turn to both Ken and Justin if that was ever.
Have you received grant money from the county in the past?
Yeah.
We have
The
asked
question
that.
is there. The question is there, but yeah, the question is,
In the past?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's
Yeah.
part of the rating or the scoring? Or is
It-
that
it-
up to the
it-
committee?
That's up to the committee. It hasn't been part of the evaluation criteria, but the question has been raised, so that information's
Is there?
available.
Okay.
correct. So it's in there.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts about, we looked at who's on that panel, the recommendations that came. And in my mind, I want to see business people. Government people look at things from an entirely different perspective. I want to see the people that have run a business, have run a successful business,
Correct.
however the size, have had employees, have had all the struggles with all of those issues, dealing with the state. I want to see them being involved in the process. I would like to kind of take a step back and look at how we can really look at those elements.
Okay.
I'm concerned about that, but not as concerned as the number one question, which Commissioner Sterrett brought up, which is, have you received funds before? And that should be part of the grading, as far as I'm concerned, because we went through this last year and it was the same exact thing. And now, and I'm going to take the hit for it because now I know at least two that I don't think should be on this list. But now I don't know which ones I want to replace it with because I don't have the applications. And we did the same thing last year, was where we ended up going through the actual applications. So I would like to, if we can, delay this another week so I can go through applications to find who I want to replace with.
We can do that.
So, go ahead.
I was going to say that's completely up to the board if you want to postpone. We're not under any timeline
Okay, cool.
considerations or anything like
Okay.
this. So however much time the board feels that they need.
So as far as what the criteria, is everybody clear? Is that the only concern we have about how this is structured? In my case, who's on the committee to recommend?
So there were some Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development people that were on the list of reviewers as well. So it was a mix of,
Johnny
know,
Berman.
Yeah.
City managers,
yes,
chamber.
yep, correct. Economic Development professionals, yes.
Business people?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I see that as.
I think of chamber people as business people, but I understand you would prefer to see someone who's actually running a small business.
Or has run a business.
I think the hard part we've run into in the past with, some of that is potentially you have somebody who may be considering applying for it, because this is a business opportunity grant, and then you end up with committee members having to conflict themselves off of that because maybe that's one of the challenges that I'm not saying that we can't do it, but
Right.
we'd have to be able to find someone that doesn't have to recuse himself or doesn't, have any type of conflict of interest or anything with that, because maybe they've submitted or it's a business partner or someone else that, that they're grading an application on. I will say, because if there are concerns, it does seem, if there's concerns about the review process, one, I want to be careful if we're adding additional criteria. I mean, the board can add you know, ultimately you have the final decision on doing that. But if there's additional criteria that should have been added, you know, as far as the scoring, I can't remember in what detail in the announcement went out that we told people this is what we're going to be looking like, because sometimes that'll automatically, well, if you're going to get scored on whether or not you receive funding, and I know if I've received funding, I'm not going to go through the exercise and apply for this, you know, that's
Right.
a screening mechanism as itself. But the other part would be is, you know, maybe we need to formalize it a little bit more on the review committee and stand up, you know, to where the board actually acts on standing up a committee that does the grant review and the recommendations. Yeah, I feel like it's a process we should probably go through, because especially if there's concerns that if the board feels like there's representation missing from the review committee or voices that the board would like to see on there, it seems like we should be doing some type of formal appointment to stand up a review committee, and then they would review and then bring those recommendations forward. At least we wouldn't be at this point having concerns or discussions about, you know, the makeup of the committee.
Right, but there's nothing, I agree. I think we should probably dive a little deeper into that, but there's nothing wrong with us having another conversation on top of what, it's just the process, right?
Absolutely.
And that's why they're recommendations.
Exactly.
So things do change. People are very well aware that it's nothing is set in stone.
Right.
But my biggest thing is this is twice now that we've done this, and I think it seems like the general consensus is the biggest parameter that needs to be set is, have you received funds before? At least it is for me,
Mhm.
which then leads to the next question of, okay, now we need applications to look at to see who's going to fill those voids. So that's where I'm at.
And interviewers, excuse me, reviewers would have known that. And one of them just told me that that was a consideration that they made when they were making.
But it wasn't
their
part of a
decision.
policy or written
It
down
was
statement.
not, correct.
Right.
Correct,
Yep.
yes.
I don't, and maybe Commissioner, you can, or Ken can shed more light on this, but it seems like I came in during COVID. It was like money just, being flushed out the door through the county.
Mhm.
Prior to that, it doesn't seem like we had so much of that. I mean, we had these economic development grants, but it wasn't this massive, constant push of money.
It was different. If you look at prior to, I'm going back to 2019 and prior. This was one of our few grant programs that we have funds, and it had been done different ways. Commissioner Starrett may remember when we used to do that as part of the budget committee. We would do the budget committee, would do the hearing, and then we would go through all the applications for the fund. It was done during the budget process. It was decided that ended up being a really lengthy evening and a lot of challenges. And the process that we have in place now was in response to trying to simplify that, to do the recruitment, do a staff review, have a committee prepare recommendations, and then come before the board to help simplify it. So then that way the three of you aren't reviewing 50
Mhm.
plus
And I think it does, and I
applications.
think it works that way, minus a few tweaks.
And then it did change because from 2020, when we had CARES Act, and then we had ARPA, and we had all this other funds. And so we were in new territory because we were doing a lot of business emergency grants, small grants, large grants, nonprofit grants, so it did. And this is our first attempt at going back in.
Right.
That's why we have funds available to support this program, because this was held in hiatus while we had CARES Act and ARPA, and really gave that the priority. And so we've kind of come full circle. So we haven't really done this since 2019. And we're open. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it's not that this isn't important. It just feels that we're seeing a lot of the same names, perhaps because we've been in grant push mode for 4 years now. And
Mhm.
so, some of these received funding in 2023. I mean, some of these entities received other types of funding, not this particular bucket of money.
Mhm.
But we are also as commissioners, and this is not just here, but throughout the country, watching these reports come out saying this amount of money was misspent. There was no, tracking on this amount of, and it's adding up to an enormous amount of money. And I think it just, maybe we sort of pulled the trigger on this a little bit too soon. Because I have concerns, and I'm hearing concerns that, number one, there's not a balance on the committee member board. We need more private sector folks on there. There's concern that almost all of these entities received past grants from the county within a couple years, if not 4 years. And some of them are significant sums of money. And I'm concerned, I'm seeing one group on here that is technically considered and is being promoted as a political organization. So that's a red flag for me. And then one of these entities has shut their business down and then reopened under a different name. So it just feels like, I know it's clunky, but it feels like we're not doing due diligence if we don't consider these things. I am concerned that we aren't reaching different groups of people. We've talked about this before. How do we get into the West Valley? How do we get into Carlton and Yamhill? And I don't know that there's a magic solution to that, but maybe it just is going to require a little bit more time, because I don't feel good about seeing the same names getting public money over and over and over again every time. And a lot of these are private entities. And I also think what I'm also hearing is that we need to be following up on the success of the prior grants. What did you received $264,000? What did you actually do with that? And what was the result of that?
In this particular program, there are 2 follow-ups, one in 6 months and one in a year. So there will be questions, and I'm pretty certain I have them already. I haven't uploaded them, but yes, there will be questions as to, what did you do with the funding? What were the results, et cetera? Did you hire someone? If you said you were going to hire someone into this position, did you do that? And those kinds of questions.
And I think that's a really big piece. The question I have in addition to that is, so you ask for supplemental information as a follow-up, but where's the teeth in terms of actually doing what you said you were going to do? Is there any kind of, well, if you don't do it, then you got to give the money back? How does that work? I know that's really kind of punitive, but otherwise, what do we do?
We have agreements that go into place with all of these grant awards that has language as far as compliance and responsibilities that are spelled out in the terms of each agreement. So we don't just release the funds. If it's approved, then we enter into an agreement. Those agreements would come back before the board. We have those contracts. So any non-compliance or issues like that, then we'd be working with county council on next steps as far as if they're in breach of contract.
Because I'm just thinking back to some past, there was no follow-up this is years ago.
Sure.
And so I look at that and go, well, one particular company looked really promising, had a contract with a large national food chain and was going, full bore.
Right.
And then within a real short amount of time, they had shut down and weren't doing anything. And it was like, wow, what do we do in that case?
Well, and that's really hard, and especially when you look at the startup grants in particular, just looking at the
Nature
inherent
of it,
risk that
yes.
comes with
Mhm.
any new business or any new startup like that. And, that's where we try to, in the past, where we had startup grants, I'm going back to 2019, there were some requirements for some participation with SEDCOR or some other things when we had the SEDCOR agreement to help, support that business. And hopefully we don't end up in a situation where there's a major grant award and unfortunately they,
Yeah.
didn't make it. But we do try to do our best to, you know, and keep it, trying not to overly burden a business with administrative and reporting requirements, but at the same time, make sure that we have sufficient language and terms in the contracts to protect the investment, or to, if they're not following through, being able to get the funds back if needed.
So I'm gonna propose maybe, I hate to add a work session to our list, but it seems like that's where we're sort of headed with this. Because these are gonna come up every year,
Mhm.
so what is our policy about this particular bucket of money? So how, thoughts on that? I mean, otherwise it feels a little bit clunky to keep bringing this up every week. I
Mhm.
think we just need to say, hey, do we have some policy issues here that we need to address first?
I'd like to, my suggestion is, and I had asked Joya this morning if I could meet with her to go over some of this. I had a lot of questions, wanted some input, her experience. How do we move forward so we avoid all of this every time? So if we were to each meet with her separately and then have a work session where we come back with the questions and thoughts that we had in our discussions.
So again, I keep comparing it to last February when we did the direct impact grants. For me, if I had the applications, I think I'm good. If you guys want to do a work session, totally fine. I can also do that. But the main key to me is having those applications, because when I do want to X one, I want to go see what I can replace it with. And maybe once I do see those replacements, be like, nope, an X, and it's gonna be the original recommendation. But without those applications, I can't do anything. So
Agreed.
But I think what he's referring to, Commissioner Johnston is referring to, is that it's a policy decision that this board ultimately will make the choices, which is not necessarily what we've communicated when we do these.
No, I think
Well,
we've communicated, because ultimately, because even a review committee, that's, it's a recommendation that's brought forward. It's ultimately, you have the final decision on the awards.
Okay.
So you have the final decision, because there's kind of twofold. You have the current, I'm trying to think for framework, so we know what to prepare for a work session. There's kind of two different questions. I think there's the pending matter that you have a recommendation. We did a solicitation, you have a grant awards, and how you want to do. And the answer might be, we're not going to do any awards until, you know, revisit, or if you want to see all the applications and schedule a work session, and we can review that and reach a determination on what to do with the current program. And then we could have the follow-up discussion to make sure that from a policy standpoint, if there's elements that you feel should be more clearly stated in the screening criteria, the makeup of the committee, or some of those things, we can do that prior to the next time that we announce, but we can do that anytime.
and I think a lot of that is setting us up for next year. I do not advocate for going back to anybody this year. I think we have plenty to choose from that we can fill gaps with somebody that we want to remove from the list. I would hate to go back to an applicant and be like, hey, you just wasted all your time. Sorry.
Sure.
So work session to go through applications and
And then we can schedule a second work session to get into the
More.
redefining the process and what that looks like.
There you go. For next year. Yeah.
Joya, are you amenable to that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So a work session to redefine, well, you
First,
want all
to
of
go
the
over-
applicants, right? You
Yeah.
would like to see them all. Okay, and I can meet individually with each of you if you have questions about them. I also have, comments made by the reviewers.
Mhm.
So I can send that to you as well, so that you can see the thought process that they each had.
Mhm.
And I will get that done today, so you have those. Because I've downloaded everything, I've got it
Okay.
all. And then a work session when would you like to have that? 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
See what we have on the calendar.
Yeah, let's look at the calendar. We have
Okay.
some other major ones coming up soon.
Before February 2025.
So you have,
What did you say?
Before February 2025.
so you have options. What I might suggest, 4th of July is on a Thursday this year, so we won't have a formal session that week. And so it, just based on, it might be a little ambitious to have this come back next week and being ready to go through all the applications. So maybe I guess that would be July 11th. If you think that would be sufficient time to go through. How many total applications were there?
42.
42.
Okay, well, let's follow up. Maybe look at our calendars and follow
Mhm.
up with Ken,
Okay,
but not next week.
Very good.
but not next week.
Uh,
We'll have something to do over 4th of July, reviewing 42 applications.
Me.
Okay, thank you.
and thank you, your energy
Uh,
is just endless. And so I know that you just went and tackled this and got it done.
Yeah.
And I feel, I feel bad that we're sort of pulling back the reins a little bit because
I
you're doing
understand.
exactly what we asked you to do.
And I also want to thank the committee and of course the applicants. The committee worked really hard. They had a 2-week deadline.
Yeah.
They all had other things going on in their lives and, in their jobs. And the applicants as well. They were given 2 weeks to complete their application. So, and they got, most of them got it done. There were some that started and never even completed.
Mm.
They might have gotten to the questions and thought this is too much. But I do, I do just want to thank everybody.
Was that our own doings to make it just a 2-week window to finish their application?
Well, we were in a deadline trying to get it done
Right.
before the end.
So
of the
next year could be
fiscal year.
different.
It will be different. There were
Okay.
a lot of mitigating factors that got us to where we are. And, it's a learning curve for me. It will be a year next week that I've been here. So I'm still sort of learning all of this. Not that that's any excuse. However, it was learning curve. So next year will be very different because we will have stronger policies. I think. And just to let you know, I've reached out to some of my colleagues in other communities that have these kinds of grants just to see what they're doing so that we might be able to see if there are some concepts or ideas that are coming from other places that could help us.
Well, don't worry about it being a learning curve. Today, 10 years ago today, I started this job and we were still trying to figure out how to do these grants. So it's not something you do in a year because we're still trying to hash through it.
We'll get there.
So thank
And
you.
Congratulations on 10 years.
10 years.
Thank you. Thank you all for your
Thanks.
patience.
We
as
we have
through
talked
this.
about how this particular function is one of the most unnatural things that we do as commissioners. It seems very odd to
Yeah.
be picking people in the private sector or nonprofits and giving them money. So it's tough either way you slice it.
Yeah, because you're picking winners and losers, and that is a
Yeah.
difficult situation to be in. Anyway, I appreciate all the work that you do, and thank you for your time today.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I'll be in touch.
Okay, thanks, Joya.
Mhm.
Okay, so we will continue that item to a work session at a to be determined date. That gets us to other business. I1 is consideration of approval of amendment number 6 to an agreement between Yamhill County and Homeward Bound Pets Humane Society, Board Order 17-375, reducing the number of dedicated and overflow kennels, increasing the base agreement amount by $15,640 and extending the contract period through September 30th of 2024. And commissioners, I don't know, do we have the sheriff on? I can't remember if he was going to be on.
Is this Sam's phone? Is that? Oh, beautiful.
Good morning.
Sheriff, are you Sam's iPhone?
That's me.
There's a new iPhone in town.
If you're speaking, we can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Hmm.
Can you hear me now?
Sheriff, can you try again?
How about now?
Yay. All right, we can hear you.
Perfect.
Okay, so we are on item I1, which is the Homeward Bound Pets contract. And just wondering if you can give us maybe a brief overview of why we're extending it through September. Seems like sort of a short extension, but there's some thought process behind that.
Yeah, so we have a work session scheduled in August on dog control. The current kenneling contract expires the end of this month, so I'm just looking to get us beyond the work session so that we can hopefully incorporate whatever results come from that work session into a new agreement.
Sheriff, is this the reducing the number of kennels when we have, I know we've had some lengthy email exchanges and I've been in conversation with Homeward Bound in terms of reducing the number of dedicated and then the overflow kennels. What does that do in terms of the reality of our capacity, knowing that we always have those kennels full?
It will be an impact to the deputies in the field as far as having an option to kennel. It will be a little bit difficult to forecast exactly what that looks like because we already struggle with that on a weekly basis, that all the kennels are full and there's not an option to take additional dogs in. So it would just be the reduction in the number of dedicated kennels. I don't know that it would have a substantial impact to the overall result, because whether we have 2 or whether we have 3, they continuously are full and are not often an option for staff anyway. So it's just trying to align the pricing with what we have available for funding in the coming year. It's a challenge every which way you look at it.
When we, during budgets, we made a contribution to make sure that this was covered. So can you clarify for us why there's a shortfall at this point?
So as I had gone back through and looked, the recommendation or the discussion during budget was the funding to essentially put back money that the patrol budget has had to cover. So in looking at the last couple of fiscal years, we were overrun. Our cost overruns were nearly $60,000 in 22-23. That was the year that there was an additional kennel added with Newburgh Animal Shelter. And then we just have had a significant number of overflow kennels. And then in 23-24, we were over by about 42,000, which again is kenneling in overflow kennels. So those kennels are charged at the same rate as our dedicated kennels. So $85 a day with Homeward Bound and $80 a day with, Newburgh Animal Shelter overflow is also $85 a day. And we've, as you well know, are just continuously overrun with dogs that we're having to kennel. And so those cost overages have been borne by the patrol budget in the sheriff's office. And so the hope was to be able to add that money back because if that $100,000 had to be borne by the patrol budget, that would have an impact to staffing. And so the hope is that with the work session that will identify, the best course moving forward. But just the reality is that we continue to struggle with a great number of dogs that are at large that are getting dumped in places in the county by individuals that, for a variety of reasons, are just turning them loose, and they wind up with us and have to be kenneled.
So to get us through until we have our work session, and the contract does expire on the 30th. So what do you anticipate? Because I think there is a fix for this, and I think that we can obviously try to fix this to the degree that we can in August. But going forward, so we have July and August and September where we have, and during the summer, we know it's sometimes a critical time. We still have that shortfall that we can't fix per this agreement, in other words. So if we approve this, then it makes it sort of ironclad that we can't fix anything until August.
I think I understand what you're saying, and whatever we do, just because the current contract does expire, whether it's a reduction or whether we just continue as is, we would have to have an amendment or an extension of the existing contract to get us beyond the work session if we're intending to incorporate the results of the work session moving forward. There is enough money in the dog control budget for the coming year to get us beyond September to continue at the current contract of the 3 dedicated kennels plus overflow at Homeward Bound. It would just be probably a more significant deficit that we'll have to look to fill towards the middle to end of the next fiscal year. If we were to continue as is until after the work session.
So as a recommendation, I don't know how you feel about the sheriff or the board, if we were to do an extension of the current capacity, the current number of kennels, the current contract, and then get to the work session and identify a fix, then we don't necessarily have to go with this amendment. Is that something we could consider?
Yes, that is something that could be considered. I was being conservative and trying to forecast, not knowing what the results of the work session would be, to try to align what we have available for the coming fiscal year with what I anticipate the cost to be. That was the recommendation for the amendment to reduce the number of kennels, just to bring some of those cost overruns under control. But it is completely up to the board to decide how to move forward. We do have enough funding to continue as is until September, just knowing that on the tail end of it, we'll probably have a little bit to make up to get through the entirety of next fiscal year.
And I don't see this as a sheriff's office problem. I see it as the county's problem. So we would, at least in my estimation, would not be sort of saying, figure it out budget wise. I think that's incumbent upon us to do that with whatever resources we have available, so that you are made whole in patrol or wherever else you're taking to make this work. That would be something I would be interested in doing if you have enough faith that we would be able to fix it before you have to go into your piggy bank.
That's absolutely completely appropriate, and I appreciate, as I'm, dog control isn't technically a sheriff's office program, but we certainly have a major part in it as far as the enforcement side of enforcing county ordinance. But historically, I think that the sheriff has had a significant role to play in determining the course moving forward. And so I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of where we're at. And I have full faith that we will come away from the work session with a good plan moving forward.
Yeah, my concern is that we are paying $85 a day for kennels that are not available. And not an option. Once they're full, they're full.
Well, once they're full, and, but we're not reducing the number of kennels and overflow kennels, which only makes the problem worse. Because then you have a dog that should be kenneled, that should be brought in, and the dog remains at large, which I think is not only a public safety issue, it's, it's a humane issue, and it's also a public health issue. So by reducing the number, we already don't have enough. We don't have an endless amount of money to have the kennels we need, because there is no end to the need. But reducing it isn't going to make it better, and we can find a way to get us through with what we have.
So if it kept the status quo and just extended the existing agreement, we don't know what that number would be. It wouldn't be 15,640.
Well, it would be $85 a day
Sorry.
times 3 kennels, but
Okay.
I don't know if the sheriff knows whether or not 3 kennels are available anymore or not. I don't know if that's what drove the decision to amend down to 2. It may be a capacity question. I don't know.
Well, we have Amanda from Homeward Bound Pets, the executive director. I don't think that was a factor in this. I think it had to do with cost. Am I right, Sheriff?
That's correct. I have no information from Homeward Bound that kennels are unavailable. I think to the chair's point of, the paying for kennels that aren't always accessible, that's where you run into the issue that's, I'm told, kind of an industry-wide problem in that shelters across the state are just full, and there's not the placement to get dogs once they have been either transferred ownership to the shelter or taken to a foster placement or some other arrangement. Those options are extremely limited nowadays. And so where it used to be that a dog could be fostered, or once the period had passed where the ownership was transferred, the shelter could adopt the dog or find an alternate placement, and it would free up that kennel. They're struggling with capacity for placement of dogs. They're just remaining at Homeward Bound, and that becomes the capacity problem that we face. They don't have any other place to put the dog, and so yes, we have been paying for kennels that the dogs are no longer property of the county. That's just the reality of what they're facing.
Thank you, Sheriff. Well, I think the crux of the matter is that they are our dogs. After, per the contract, a number of days, they cease to become our dogs. And Homeward Bound then has to figure out what to do with them.
Mhm.
So in effect, we're saying here, this is your problem now. So I think we do bear some responsibility. I'd love to have Amanda weigh in on the capacity and the number of kennels. Can we chat with her briefly?
Hi, can you hear me?
By yourself, and I think you're,
Hi, can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. First, I'm gonna apologize. I'm having major allergy attacks, so hopefully I don't cough or sneeze while here. So we actually it's a multitude of issues. There really is nowhere else to transfer the dogs once they come to us. Oregon Humane Society, Newburgh, all these other shelters, they are also at capacity. So the majority of the dogs that are coming into us are large breed dogs. That's what's being dumped the most. And so if the dogs that are being dumped the most are large breed, that makes it very hard to adopt them out. So we actually have a few different issues that are happening here. Yes, once the stray hold time is up, they can be transferred to homeward bound pets. But if we're already full, there's no way we can continue to take the dogs. We're not going to double up kennels, or have dogs on one side of the door and dogs on the other side of the door. That's just absolutely not safe. So a couple things to look at. In 2022, 8 months out of the year, you guys were already in overflow. 23, it was 6 months out of the year. This year from January to May, it's already been 3 months of overflow. Each year you're starting at capacity, and then ending at capacity. So the tough part is figuring out, how we get the dogs to move out of here faster. There's other things to take into account. This year, the dogs that have been transferred to us, all but one dog was fixed. So one whole dog out of all of the dogs that came in was neutered. Everybody else still had to be fixed. That adds time to our timeline, where we're getting the animals spayed, we're getting them neutered, we're getting them vaccinated. And all of that adds to how long they're sitting there. So some things that we've been doing trying to alleviate the stress is, if homeward bound pets doesn't technically have a kennel for them to be transferred into, we've been getting them spayed or neutered, we've been getting them vaccinated, and we've been posting them up for adoption. We haven't been waiting until they're actually physically our dog. That's how we've been trying to help the system. And so it is, we're definitely seeing a lot more dogs being dumped in Yamhill County. And I mean, just in the last couple weeks, we had 2 little dogs and 2 litter mates that were dumped on the outskirts of town. That's very unusual for us out here. And not a single owner came forward. So it's kind of a multitude of issues that we're having. We're doing our best to get the dogs adopted out. I am reaching out to as many places as possible to get them transferred. There just isn't anywhere to transfer them to. So although you guys could go down to 2 kennels, it's the same situation. You'll have 2 kennels, but you'll still be probably at capacity. And I don't know how to bridge that gap to make it, where there's always kennels open, other than we did build 3 kennels, 3 emergency kennels, to help alleviate some of this problem. However, the kennels are not weatherized to be used 12 months out of the year. So is it, putting dogs out there so that way you guys have more space? That's the tough part. So that is our thoughts. Sorry.
Sheriff, the redemption policy, I know sometimes if one of the county dogs racks up a large bill, it might be a bit hard to get the owner to redeem. I know you've been working with owners. Can you give us a little bit of what your policy is now and how you're working to get these dogs moving back home?
Yeah, if we're able to identify an owner, we really have been open to just about anything. There is some challenges with the wording of the ordinance itself and the way that the redemption process works. There's not a clearly identified way or means for people to enter into, say, a payment program. And obviously that places a burden on Homeward Bound, because they're the entity that is responsible for the licensing and redemption, the clerical contract that we have. And so then that places extra burden on them to keep track of individuals. We have waived all kinds of late fees and redemption fees. The only thing that we have not budged on is the requirement that dogs be licensed and vaccinated. Those two go hand in hand. I would have to go back and see if there was a way to recreate, but I'm going to estimate very conservatively, it's in the thousands of dollars of fees that have been waived in order to reunite dogs with their owners and get them out of the kennels and back to their homes. It's just one of the realities that we face is sometimes owners are not in a position or prepared to deal with all the things, if their dog is not licensed and needs to be and has to get current, and then there's additional fees and kenneling on top of it. We have been extremely lenient when it comes to that, with the exception of licensing. And we have taken the stance now that anytime we respond to a dog call in the county, and I can't speak for any of the cities, but in the rural parts of the county and the cities that we serve as law enforcement under our policing contracts, it's essentially a zero tolerance. We have probably issued more citations for unlicensed dog or dog at large in the last 6 months than the last 6 years. And when that comes around to have an effect of being able to reunite dogs, I guess we'll find out. But it's really the only mechanism we have to track and try to return dogs to their owners is to have them licensed and be current and know where these dogs belong.
Thank you.
If I may say, the reducing of the fees has, I think, allowed a lot more dogs to go back to their homes. When they are citing these owners, most owners already know they're going to be cited, and so they're paying that. We've only had one case where the owner was cited several months ago for a no license, and he did not get his license. So when he came to get his dog, obviously we're not going to waive all the fees, the impound fees, the license fee, because he's already been cited. He already knew what he needed to do way back in March. So far with the waiving of the fees, we've seen a major impact with people actually coming in to redeem their dogs. Whereas before, by the time that they would come in, they were backtracking the license fee, they were impound and boarding, and some of these owners were looking at $300, $400, $500 to get their dog out, and that's how we ended up with tons of dogs. We have several dogs here that their owner couldn't afford the fees in the first place from 2022 and 23, and they ended up staying here. So I think the waiving of some of these fees, the sheriff's department has been wonderful in that. And I do think absolutely they do need to be licensed. They need to have their rabies vaccine. But with them waiving some of the fees, I think that has helped reduce how many dogs are staying with us. And it's tremendously helped us here. So.
Okay, thank you. So if I'm understanding correctly, if we are simply to extend the existing contract that we have with Homeward Bound Pets, there's money to be able to do that. It's just we're going to have to make up sort of more on the back end, budget wise. Okay.
Gonna let if the sheriff.
Yes.
Your signal's breaking up, Sheriff.
Correct.
Sheriff, your cell phone signal is breaking up.
Would be able to continue as is right now. Can you hear me now?
He said he
Yes.
solved all the problems and we're good to go.
Okay. Very good.
Yes, you are correct. We can continue as is through September, given the funding that we currently have.
I have a question, Sheriff, regarding the wording of the ordinance and provisions for a payment program. For some people, even a small amount of money for licensing or vaccination, even if it's low cost vaccination, it's really tough because people are struggling, especially if they're on a fixed income. Is there a way that we could pretty much, the object of the game is to get the dog back home. It's costing us more to keep him here than we could recoup in. So if we were to be a little more lenient, is there a way that we could, fix the wording of the ordinance, establish a payment program, let the dog go back home? And if we wind up not receiving the money that we have, due us, for those, for the vaccinations and the licenses, then couldn't we build that into what we used to have, the Angel Fund for medical costs, to something along the lines of hardship fund for folks? I know there's a senior fee for licenses, and that reduces it some.
The one thing that I would just highlight, and I'm just looking at it strictly from a budgetary standpoint, if you remember going through this budget, this program operates on licensing fees and the other fees that are charged. And so without supplemental funding, because I believe the intent of a lot of the fees that we're talking about, and I get it, and it seems, I'm not looking at it just strictly on getting the dogs out, but if the intent of the fees is to come in and reimburse for for the kenneling and holding the animals and getting the licensing fees, I'll just point out that we're kind of putting ourselves further behind, because if we're not collecting those fees, or we don't have those fees or that fee revenue coming into this program, I'm not sure how we're paying for the contracts and the agreements and the kenneling costs, because there's no other revenues that are coming into this. I think the last several years, we had that donation, we had the trust that was paying for the care and sheltering of animals, but those funds have been spent down. And at this point, there's really no other revenues that are coming in. There's no general fund revenue. There's no other revenue sources that are coming in to pay for these programs. And I think that's the quandary that we kind of have, that we want to get the animals out so we're not incurring the costs, but then the more we waive fees, then we're not the program's not having any revenue that's coming in to support the time and effort and the administration of everything that was happening leading up to this. So that's, and I think that's why in conversations with the sheriff that we had basically this Band-Aid to at least get us to the August work session, to still also have sufficient funds and have it clear that maybe there's other considerations or a different direction that the county may want to program. Because obviously what we have here is it strictly from a budgetary standpoint, it's not sustainable without additional resources coming into this program.
With my math, this is keeping this the same. It's just saying that this is for August and September until we have our work session.
Correct.
So $85 a day times 3 kennels times 30 days times 2 months is 15,300. Right?
Unless we have overflow.
No overflow. It's reducing.
Which there's no overflow anyway, I guess is the point.
Yes.
So that'd be
Right.
22,
September.
950, 23 grand. I see.
Right.
Because it doesn't exist, is my understanding, because it's full and it's consistently full. Anyway, hard part is it sounds like this is all work session stuff.
Yeah, we're kind of veering into work session territory, but
So, well, my recommendation is we just extend the existing contract with the assumption that we are not going to have the sheriff's office take the hit for this out of their patrol budget or anywhere else. And that is what we come up with in August. Because
Which would be the 22 or 23 grand? Or do we know that number?
well, I guess the whole point is that by reducing the number of kennels going into this and then reducing overflow, that doesn't put us in, it doesn't change the situation.
Right.
It actually makes it worse. And then we have deputies out there, because as the sheriff said, it impacts the deputies in the field who are now what do I do? I have nowhere to take this animal. So I'll leave it out here on the road.
My understanding is, I know it's a bad situation, but it sounds like that's happening now because that kennel does not exist and we're paying for an overflow that doesn't exist, even though our name, I guess, technically is on it. It's just not there, whether our own dog is still in it or.
I don't.
so our
okay.
dogs are not adoptable per se. They're large dogs, they're certain breeds and they're hard to adopt out. So they do remain in the kennels, even though technically they're not in county ownership.
So then Commissioner Sterrett's right. We just need to extend the existing contract.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we're going to have dogs kicked out of a kennel.
And because Homeward Bound is a no-kill shelter, and some of these dogs are aggressive, some of these dogs do have health issues, then that's a whole nother discussion, which is a very difficult one to have. But the sheriff and I have talked about some of the components of that. And again, I think for what we've done is we've said, these are our dogs, Homeward Bound. Now they're your dogs. And what does Homeward Bound do? So the reason they're full is because they're our dogs.
Right. So I would agree to extend the existing contract till September until we can figure this out with a work session.
So can we just do that now, or do you have to come back with an amendment on the date?
No, we could adjust the numbers now if, then that we would make that change to the amendment, but I'd want to confirm with the sheriff and reps from Homeward Bound that the 3 kennels are in fact available.
The 3 kennels are available. You do currently have 2 dogs here. So there's one, as of today, you have 1 kennel open out of the 3 that are already for you. So to be clear, when you guys have 3 kennels that are assigned to you, Homeward Bound pet dogs are not in those kennels. It is only your dogs. The overflow prior to the new contract was we had to have overflow kennels at all times. That's how it was written into the old contract. The new contract is only if they're available, and you only get charged for an overflow kennel if one of your dog enters that kennel. So really at the base, you're only paying for the 3 kennels, whether or not you have a dog in there. But as of today, you do have 2 dogs that are here and 1 open kennel.
Okay, so basically, essentially what the board would be considering is a motion to extend the existing contract through September 30th, but staying with the 3 kennels at the daily rate of $85 per kennel. And I don't have the math of exactly what that would be over 3 months, but
22,950.
it's
Unless it's
22 something,
22,950.
22,950. But again, I don't know if that creates a budget concern for the sheriff, but it sounds like the board is prepared to
I'm okay with
accept
that.
that. And if it is an impact to the sheriff's budget, then the board will find the funds elsewhere.
Mhm.
Is that right?
I think so.
Yes. It's like, I guess.
The sausage making at its best.
All right. So is there a motion on the floor?
Believe Commissioner Johnston.
I would move that we just extend the original contract till
I mean, extending the original contract would still include language for the overflow kennels. This amendment also was removing the availability for the county to utilize overflow.
We
kennels.
have 1 extra kennel right now.
At the
So
moment, sounds like we do, yeah.
But that's right now. That's not typical. Amanda, would you agree? That's not typical for us to have any room at the inn?
Yeah, honestly, I would agree. Some of the things that we're seeing now. So, okay, so I've been here since 2020. What used to be is an owner would call, say, that's my dog. We'd say, okay, supply vet records, and they would. And within a day, the dog would be out of here. Well, now what we're having is owners are not taking their animals to vets. So then we have to rely on pictures. And if they send us a picture, then the sheriff's department has to okay that. And that's where we're seeing a lot of your kennels being dogs being in there longer while we wait to get the authorization for them to be released off a picture. And a lot of times these pictures are a year ago. Or the sheriff's department has done great. One of the dogs that's here, they had to track down the new owner. So that's part of where we're seeing the longer thing. But at the gist of it, you guys have 3 kennels that you've rented out that are leased to you. And right now you have 1 of those kennels available.
Okay. I want to make sure we stick to the item on the agenda.
So,
Yes,
so
we're gonna
maybe
have
I
a
can-
long-
Maybe I can craft a possible motion here. The motion would be to amend the current homeward bound contract to extend the contract through September 30th, 2024, for 3 kennels at $85, 3 dedicated kennels at $85 per day. The county would pay for those, whether they're used or not.
Mhm.
And to amend the contract to remove the ability to utilize overflow kennels. And that would be the motion.
I'm all right with that because they've changed the parameters on the overflow anyway, and they're not guaranteed to us anymore. And we have one empty, and we have to get to September. One empty dedicated.
As of today, right?
Oh, as of 11 o'clock.
Sure.
Right.
I understand.
Dave
Yeah,
Young.
I get it.
So do you want to pull your former motion and then accept Christian's?
Yes, I pull my former motion and so moved Christians.
Okay.
All right.
You're
Any further discussion? Clear as mud.
Yeah, okay.
All right. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Item I2 is consideration of approval of the submission of a grant application for the 2024 Oregon Emergency Management State Homeland Security Program, or SHSP grants. And I see we have Sergeant Young on the call.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Morning.
Well, thank you, Commissioner.
Good. So, we don't actually have the application.
So my
us?
conversations with Sergeant Young were, there are applications from other jurisdictions.
Okay.
But that ours isn't in there because you need board approval. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, typically the forms that we fill out to the state are electronic. So once we hit submit, it's like applying for the grant. Although, we're not locked into anything until a contract comes. But so I really had to wait until we got approval on that to apply before we could supply that information. I'm happy to talk about what I plan on applying for if and when you're ready.
Is that the water plant basins or is that another?
That's a different one. The county, the Yamhill County Emergency Management in concert with the Sheriff's Office will be applying for a mobile command center / emergency operations center. We're asking for $75,000 for the trailer itself and outfitting the trailer to be a supporting piece of equipment for not only response to county incidents, but also to response to cities when we support incidents within those cities, such as the water crises in Amity and the city of Yamhill.
Okay, any questions on the application?
None.
No.
Okay.
And then I can talk about the other applications for the other agencies within the county if you would like for situational awareness.
Sure. Yeah, I'm curious about the water plant basins.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. The city of Newburgh is going after a competitive grant for the engineering phase 1, if you will, on a requirement that the Department of Environmental Quality is handing down on water providers to make their facilities more secure. So this phase is the engineering and design phase, like I mentioned, to really start that process to get those basins. And I don't know what these basins are. I'm not a water provider or a water employee, so I'll go with what I'm told. These basins get covered to protect them and keep the water sound for the residents who utilize the water for the city of Newburgh. Any questions on that specific grant?
No.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Are there more?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's three more that we'll talk about real quick. Actually, two more, I'm sorry. McMinnville Water and Light is also putting in for a grant, a request grant, so they can upgrade their security posture at their water reservoirs. So they're asking for $100,000, but they're also contributing money on their own, matching, if you will, which is not a requirement, which goes a long ways to show that they're invested in the security of their water basins, if you will. And then finally, well, I'll pause right there. Any questions on that one for Mac Water and Light?
No.
No, thank you.
And then finally, we've got every year there's a competitive side and an allocation side to the State Homeland Security Program grant. Every year, Yamhill County, for now, the time being, gets about $54,000 allocated to it. And three years ago, this is the third year now, we decided as a county to use that money to work on a emergency operations plan updates across the county, do a countywide initiative to get the county and the cities up to speed on their emergency operations plan. This year, the city of Newburgh is up for that, and they will be applying for that one as well, to the tune of $54,000 and some change.
Okay.
Sheriff, Sergeant, I have a question about the mobile EOC that you're applying for. We do have something, a piece of equipment in the sheriff's office, from what I remember in the past, that has some components of sort of a mobile EOC, if you will. Do we not?
Yeah, yes, we do. And I'm not super familiar with that piece of equipment as far as the capacity of staff inside that to work, but it is an old converted ambulance, so it's not something that's specifically designed for a command center or a mobile EOC, which in this case, it would be a dedicated piece of equipment that would be able to house or staff or hold a staff of 6. I think getting 6 folks into the command van, I'll call it the command van because I don't know what the sheriff calls that piece of equipment. But getting 6 folks into that to work and support an incident is not going to be a very conducive environment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
No, I would move approval of item I2, which is consideration of approval of a submission of a grant application for the 24 Oregon Emergency Management State Homeland Security Program grant.
All right, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Sergeant Young. Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Commissioners. Have a great day.
Okay, I3 is consideration of approval of a blanket refund order authorizing the tax collector to issue lawful refunds to taxpayers effective July 1, 2024 through June 30th of 2025. I will move approval. Any questions on this?
None.
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. I4, consideration of approval of agreement number DOR-065-24 between Yamhill County and the Department of Revenue to establish GIS digitized boundaries for taxing districts in the amount of $60,000. Effective upon approval through July 31st of 2025. This is for that, the second half of that mapping project that Derek and team have been working on. And I will move approval. Is there any questions? Are there any questions?
Nope.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes. Thank you. I5, consideration of approval of proposed HHS behavioral health usual and customary rates, public health clinic rates, and environmental health fees for 2024-25 effective July 1st of 2024.
And this is something that's an annual process, going over the rates and adjusting for a variety of different increases. So I would move approval of item I5.
Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. I6, consideration to authorize Lindsay Manfred to assign the role of intergovernmental agreement IGA manager in the express payment and reporting system, or e-express, to receive funding under the intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Human Services for the financing of community developmental disabilities program services.
Chair, I would move approval of item I6.
Any further discussion?
None.
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. I7 is consideration of approval of a proposed rate increase of 7.03% as recommended by Yamhill County Solid Waste Department and the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, or SWAC, for waste management of Newburgh Transfer Station effective July 1st of 2024. And we do have representatives here if there's any questions. But in sum, they are, they need to operate within sort of a ratio of return. Is it technically return, Christian, that they operate within?
It's an operating ratio. Ashley could probably speak a little bit more specifically to it, but yeah, the goal is that the rates are designed to cover their costs and provide for a slight profit margin as long as it's within that spending ratio.
Okay.
Right, and I
And-
believe these rates would keep them within that ratio.
And the increases are not a surprise that they are being driven by labor costs, just like everyone else. So do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. I8 is consideration of approval of a proposed rate increase of 9% by Yamhill County Solid Waste Department for Recology Western Oregon effective July 1st of 2024. And I believe this is specific to the hauling costs, but they also do operate within that ratio or range. And the increases are being driven by labor costs, disposal fees, and fuel, obviously. So do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Any questions?
Yes.
Okay. Ashley, do you want to maybe come up?
Well, and it's probably, yeah, probably both of you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thanks for your patience and
Yep.
sitting through the meeting so far.
We also have our government affairs and community relations manager online.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
So my first one's going to be, I missed the SWAC meeting. Was anything discussed about customer service?
I can talk to that.
Okay.
So customer service has been a bit broken. We had a cyber attack back late October that crashed, well, the corporate shut our systems down. We didn't get our systems back up until it was February. And right now we're fully running again. Last November, we also hired a new office manager, and we also had a few new CSRs, and they didn't have the equipment that they need to use to take care of the customers in the customer or the call center. So we know that that has been a challenge for us, and it's definitely improving with some work to do still.
Okay. So I've had multiple complaints about hours on end waiting on hold, and people just give up and hang up just for simple things of either ordering, a roll-off dumpster or waiting weeks on end for just yard debris dumpsters. I know personally, last year, the year before, I was probably 6 to 7 months. It was so long, I really honestly can't remember. I had a dumpster where the bottom was getting rotted out, and I had one brought in the interim, but then it took 6 or 7 months to get the original back, which, I mean, I didn't care, but I mean, it's very long wait times for things like that, that if we're approving increases like this, we need to at least ask the questions and make sure that somebody is focused on this, because this is very important to the people that are, bringing their concerns to me. And then my question, was if SWAC discussed any of this, or if they're getting complaints about long hold times, or did they just pass this right on through to us?
I would say maybe we've gotten one or two, so it sounds like they're going straight to you.
Okay.
So the ones I've had were either the long hold times, and I referred them to the online email address, which I myself as a user have gotten better results than calling.
Mhm.
Or it was a route issue which was going on, and we took care of that. So
Okay.
at the SWAC meetings, it is discussed if any big complaints come through or something, that's supposed to be brought forth by the franchisee to talk about. Other than just nothing really has been brought up about that as far as, because it might be day-to-day stuff, but it sounds like you're getting most of those phone calls.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Big concern of mine. Again, I understand that, increases mainly it's labor, fuel, equipment, wait times for equipment coming in. It's all that stuff. But when I'm getting phone calls from people that they're not the happiest because of issues, I have to address those.
That's interesting. We've had issues too, but I didn't know this was happening. So is there an effort to communicate to the public that there's been some pretty major breaches with?
Well, it's been resolved. I don't know how public it
Okay.
was.
Okay.
But it has been resolved, and they have new processes in place. Hold times are down. So I believe that we've turned that corner, but I would encourage the commissioners, to give me a call anytime they get a complaint like that, and I will jump right all over it. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Just to add to that, route concerns, folks will say that there is no local contact, that there is no, in other words, there's no relationship, no response. So to that same thing, but this is going back a number of years. So I know a number of people who have opted to make other arrangements because they just could not get any response in terms of just the real basic question. So that's been ongoing. I know it doesn't change when you've got to pay people more and it costs more for fuel. But in terms of customer service, I think that local touch point and getting a call back is huge. It's been going on for a really long time. Not just recently.
No, I agree. Yes, I can go back to 2015 with stories of it always, for some reason, even when it was WOW, just for some reason, the customer service always lacked, and not to just a little bit. It was hour-long waits to where people just gave up, almost like it was, nope, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So
Well,
anyway,
I hear you, and I can tell you that's unacceptable, and we'll definitely bring that back. It is improving. I have an excellent ops supervisor under me over the hauling site that is very customer service oriented, and he's constantly doing meeting up with customers and site surveys. So I'd like to think that page is turned, but it's still the office customer service is improving, and we're working on that.
Thank you.
that's it.
All right. Was there a motion?
Yes, there was.
Yes.
By who?
Did you make the motion?
Nope.
I made the motion. Okay, I made the motion. You had a
So
Yep, I had questions.
Commissioner Starrett moved approval. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes. Thank you
Thank you,
both.
guys.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much.
Right, I-9 is consideration of approval of a board order and resolution 24-06-20-1 in the matter of the adoption of the Yamaha County budget for fiscal year 2024-25, setting appropriations and levying taxes. I will move approval of item I-9. That's a very, very short sentence to sum up a massive amount of work that went into getting us here. So any questions, concerns?
Just thanks to all the folks who were in the front lines of this. I'm looking to my left over here. And everybody who took the time to weigh in on the budget. So, yeah.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. We have nothing for public hearings today. And speaking of budgets, I believe we have a budget committee vacancy recently that's been posted to our website.
We had 2 days of AOC meetings, and I believe all of us were involved in that. HHS, Public Safety, Veterans, Board of Director, Legislative, and talking specifically about the legislative priorities for 25. And in virtually every concern in every department was getting the true cost of the mandated services at the county level covered by the state. And that's been something that folks are realizing, that without that, we're going to continue to struggle at the county level.
The other theme is that state legislators have absolutely no idea what counties do.
Correct.
Or what county commissioners are responsible for. And it doesn't matter how many times we meet with them and explain this to them, we have to continue to do it. So every interaction, every level of lobbying for certain things needs to also contain education about what counties actually do and what we're responsible for. But jumping real quick back to the budget committee vacancy. So it's, the opening is posted on our website. Is there a closing? I didn't catch if there's a closing
think
date
so.
to that. Oh,
No, because we didn't, a lot of times, it's up to the board when we want to start to fill that position, because it's really infrequent where we pull the budget committee together mid-budget year, or and so we have it posted if you like. I'm also trying to think on we could get a little more aggressive with advertising. We're getting applications now, but if you want to consider them as we go, or if you want to set a close date, maybe later this fall, it's kind of hard to make an appointment and then they actually don't really get heavily involved with the budget process until budget committee week, which is the first week of May. So,
Well, I think if we get applicants, they're going to want to know, otherwise it's sort of like languishing and it falls off their radar. But I also know that people who are committed to this, really interested in it, might be paying attention more to either board meetings or, so I'd like to maybe put a, 30 days or 45 days and give folks a chance to find out what we do here at the county and why we do have a budget committee, other than waiting till the very end when they might have forgotten they applied.
Does it go on the paper or just the website?
we just posted it to the website for right now, because we'll go to newspaper or do things like that only if, like if this was January or February, I'd probably be panicking a little bit, because we do want to get someone committed, because I mean, it is a commitment, especially for that week. To commit to their calendar for
Right.
those 3 days.
Well, since this is the first time I think that we brought it up in a board meeting, I would be fine with, 45 days, 45 days. And then it just helps it keep it on our radar, helps us keep it on our radar. Okay, so 45?
Yeah.
Does that work?
Agreed.
So we'll look at that again in about 45 days. I don't think I have any other announcements. Anything new?
Last weekend was Sheridan Hometown Days. It went well. That was the most I've ever seen in that parade.
Yes, they kept going and going.
Yeah.
And
Very
I'm
windy,
running
but
out of more candy.
Great parade. Followed Sheriff Elliott's float, so I didn't have to toss candy. I just picked up theirs and tossed it. This Saturday is Carlton's parade, Carlton Fun Days, 10 a.m.
Sounds good.
Ambassadors enjoyed Sheridan. I think there's 3 ambassadors for Carlton. And
Yeah, they were pumped. They were
yeah,
very
they were
enthusiastic.
very excited.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
Nothing.
Okay, if not, I will adjourn the Yamaha County Board of Commissioners formal session for June 20th, 2024. It is 11:35. Thank you.
Thank you.